Why does it not work in a match if it does in practice? Chapter 5. Transition. Even though in the previous section of this book I have emphasized being patient and focusing on achieving favorable results in the adult categories, instructions were not provided on what to do after such transition. In tennis, it is often observed that the players who have access to optimal tools, such as a good coach, high-quality equipment, and top-level hitting partners, fail to deliver good results during matches. Why do they not perform as expected when seemingly perfect preparations and arrangements suited for their success are made? What goes on in their brains? Could it be that because everything is perfect, they feel pressured? What thoughts could have blocked them on a psychophysiological level? How to get out of this block? I will try to provide answers for these questions in the following pages. Competing. Essence of survival. Everyone is born with competitiveness in their DNA. This trait is vital for survival because in the past we had to compete for food, water, or shelter. Competitiveness essentially implies attempting to avoid loss, but nowadays, fortunately, losing doesn't have to equal death. Even though competitiveness is innate, our relationship with competing is determined by our environment. There are types of people who require a competitive atmosphere, and they take every opportunity to challenge others. With these individuals, coaches usually come up with all sorts of games just to ensure that they devote their everything. Contrarily, there are lots of people who tend to overthink, can't sufficiently motivate themselves, and struggle with inducing the right emotion and managing fear. What triggers this fear, and what can be done by parents to prevent it? Reacting to results. We need to understand that in the moment we react to the result, we alter the child's consciousness. Thus, they can push the direction in which the mind of a player evolves. A person whom the player trusts is capable of influencing them, either positively or negatively, with a single sentence. This affects the motivation of a player. If the player is assured that they are themselves to work even harder. Alternatively, the player might start doubting himself and lose the desire to improve. The person reacting to results holds immense power over the player and should be aware of it. What makes it so important, and why is it so crucial to pay attention to our reactions? When playing sports, athletes often reach their limit and would do anything to win. At this limit, you can see who they really are, and extremely strong emotions are connected with such high exertion. Since the sport activates the brain regions used by the more primitive animals, we sometimes see humans acting similar to wildlife. There are just as many chemical and emotional fluctuations in our brain as there are turning points in matches. Imagine your team was winning most of the match and then a couple of quick goals cause you to be trailing one goal with a few seconds to go. Your brain is extremely alert and your adrenaline is off the charts when you rush to the goal, believing that you can change the outcome. You miss and suddenly there is nothing left, just frustration, disappointment, and silence. Sports offer many situations such as this, and it is important to realize that a child experiences a large spectrum of emotions that form their personality in a very brief period. The mind evolves much faster than it would have if the child had been sitting at home on a quiet night. Biologically, emotions are a tool to prioritize the attention paid to stimuli. For example, if you are walking in a forest with your friend, you distribute your attention between the conversation and the terrain. However, when you spot a bear, you become scared and your brain focuses all attention to the bear as if nothing else exists. Research in the genetics field suggests that emotions have the power to even alter DNA. At the moment an emotion is being experienced, the mind of an athlete is open and malleable. The stimuli that form the mind emerge from the environment, and the environment in sports is basically whoever reacts to the performance, mistakes, results, career achievements, etc. This implies that parents, coaches, trainers, peers, teammates, and physiotherapists play a role in the development of a player's mind. Neuroplasticity. Consciousness is like a dynamic puzzle. One of the important properties of the brain is neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity allows the human brain to change the nature of consciousness based on stimuli from the environment. Every time we experience something new, the brain adds the freshly acquired information into the existing system. Thus, each new piece of information slightly alters this system. This constant integration of new information changes the consciousness and perception, which implies that by the time you finish this book, your views will have been different from those you had before you started reading if you actually paid attention to it. You can think of your consciousness as a giant puzzle where every new information equals taking a new piece of puzzle and putting it into the existing picture. With each piece, a new connection is forged, which could result in you acting and viewing things differently. For example, if before reading this book you would criticize your child and after reading it you would pay closer attention to the words you choose, it implies that you have made new connections and they have changed your consciousness. We constantly evolve, and so does our consciousness. You can positively alter the consciousness of your children by giving them the appropriate information and experience so that it develops in a desired direction. Now, let's pose the following question. What is consciousness? There are several possible approaches and theories explaining this phenomenon. Some of the theories are posited by religion, others by philosophy, and even science has offered its take on consciousness. This question basically seeks to identify the essence of being, which is something we can't answer with certainty. However, what we know is that consciousness exists, that it can be measured, and that it is connected with brain activity. For explanation purposes, I will adopt the neurocognitive approach that considers the brain to be a computer which works through electrochemical signals compared to the standard computer that works through electrical signals. While the electrical computer receives information through the mouse and keyboard, our brain, the electrochemical computer, constantly receives sensory perceptions as information. The brain processes the information obtained through the senses at a specific rate, stores it, and subsequently recalls it when required. Memory. Based on the information stored in memory, the brain selects what to perceive and decides how to act. Behavior. This part is slightly tricky because the brain acts and perceives not only based on what it experiences previously, but also based on how it considers these experiences, or thinking. This implies that when we have two people who have experienced the same thing, let's take a car accident tying a person to a wheelchair, their thinking can alter the behavior of these two individuals in significantly different manner. One might become devastated and turn into an alcoholic, while the other one might view the situation as a challenge and could turn into a motivational speaker to inspire others. Consciousness is characterized by subjectivity. It is interpretation that plays an integral role when sorting the received information, and therefore what one experiences does not define their behavior in the future. Here is another example of how the same environment can be viewed from completely different angles. If three people visit Prague at the same time, they would see the same place but might focus on completely different things. The first one might be amazed by the buildings and the elements of architecture because he is an architect. The second one might be enamored by the beautiful Czech women because he is in an unhappy marriage. The third one, a huge sports fan, might focus on all sports apparel shops, stadiums, and arenas. Their consciousness perceives the same environment under the same conditions in completely different ways because their realities are formed by different experiences in the past. Hence, we cannot visualize the consciousness as a camera that goes around and records everything because the consciousness selectively picks the stimuli that forms its reality. All the experience, information, memories, dreams, and ambitions create an enormous database called the consciousness. The previous examples help us understand why the same players often perceive the same situation differently. A penalty in the 93rd minute could be the cause of excitement to one football player and terrify the other. The difference could be that the first one scored a deciding penalty in the finals of a championship while the other one missed and now fears being criticized again. The audience in the stands does not see the difference between these two players taking a penalty, but the reality of these respective players are diametrically different. Merely worrying about one's performance dramatically decreases the chance of success because it causes stress and the fear of failure. The stress and fear cause a physiological response which influences coordination abilities and decision-making. When they fail again, self-doubt during daunting moments is reinforced. The brain stores this negative information in the neuron circuits that are activated when a similar situation is encountered again. The player who is supposed to take the deciding penalty tunes their consciousness to a nerve circuit built in their mind that they use when taking penalties. If this circuit carries self-doubt, disappointment, and failure, the brain is not able to immediately set aside these components. The brain launches this circuit, and the feeling, "Dang, penalty shot again? What if I fail?" is connected within it through an electrochemical pathway. Fear, doubt, and other emotions are supplied by the subconsciousness, and what arrives to your consciousness is just a consequence of it. The player all of a sudden perceives the goal as something with almost no openings when a goalie stands inside. New experience causes complex changes in our brains on both biological and psychological levels that continuously alter our consciousness. If the player manages to score the penalty, happiness follows immediately. New synaptic changes occur because the brain produces a large quantity of the neurotransmitter called dopamine. The synapse is the small space between two neurons where they connect and where the signal changes its character from electrical to chemical. Dopamine promotes the feeling of happiness and accelerates motor learning. The nerve circuit used for taking penalties will be modified, and there is a higher chance that fear will be eliminated the next time, and the player will look forward to this penalty, which ultimately results in them having a higher chance of scoring. New nerve circuits can also grow and develop when new situations are experienced. For example, if an ice hockey player learns a new special deke, a new circuit is formed, and when they learn what outcomes may follow after this deke and how to implement it in order to score, these circuits develop. With the increased number of abilities, the brain creates more and more associations and can alter players' behavior. Thereby, players will probably be able to use the deke in the next penalty shot. The more they use the ability, the more it gets automatized and the neural connection becomes stronger because of myelin production. Myelin boosts signal transmission, and a complex net of neural circuits which is unique to each individual is formed. Three occasions on which we influence the player's mind. Can one sentence make a difference in the mental positioning of the player? How do the communication tools we use influence the mindset of the player? Before the match. I was eating lunch at a tennis camp with all the children and parents. A 7-year-old from my group was scheduled to play a friendly match after lunch against a German 7-year-old player, which was a new incentive in this young athlete's career. While having lunch, his mother said, "Eat, otherwise you won't have enough strength to beat the German." The young player looked at his mom, saying that he was not hungry. Maybe he was not hungry because he was slightly stressed about the upcoming match. But we need to realize the signal that his mom sent him with her words. Even though she did not realize it, she indirectly told him that she expected him to win. If at the moment the player walks into the court he thought to himself that he is expected to win, the result becomes more important than just playing the game for fun. The goal is to actually make the player enjoy the game irrespective of the result. When the child plays a game to win, there is a risk of them becoming addicted to winning. After winning, compliments follow and the brain produces dopamine, which causes the feeling of happiness. However, dopamine is also produced when a person is using large amounts of drugs. While the drugs stimulate the central nervous system externally, the wins cause dopamine to be excreted in smaller amounts and only in certain brain regions, but it's still enough to create an actual addiction. Now, you might tell yourself that having your children addicted to winning is a good thing and that when they crave success, they will eventually attain it. However, as with all addictions, even winning carries withdrawal syndromes. If your child loses, the loss can be accompanied by the emotional tantrums and outbursts of anger. We also risk the children building such a tremendous pressure that they won't be able to handle. They can become emotionally unstable, fear the competition, and play tight just not to lose. Hence, it is necessary for the child to love the game itself and not just the win. On top of all of this, the learning process is much better if a child enjoys the game rather than focuses on winning. As already established, winning is a byproduct of being completely relaxed, concentrated, confident, and enjoying the game. If the player focuses on the present moment and enjoys every shot, pitch, or rotation, positive results will automatically emerge. Parents and coaches should redirect the attention of the player to the process instead of results. If we communicate with our children in a way that will make them focus on the result, thoughts such as the ones below will plague their minds. What if I lose? I can't lose against this player, my ranking is better. Everyone expects me to win, I have to just push it in somehow. These thoughts block them from using their full potential, concentration, and even the ability to enjoy the game. Following are some practical tips on what to tell and what not to tell your children. Don't say, "You got this, you can beat them." Upon hearing these words, your child might think that they can win effortlessly and thereby underestimate the opponent. The opponent won't be beaten just because they are ranked lower. The player should try to fight hard, irrespective of who stands on the opposite side, and beat the opponent point after point, play after play. You are better. You will beat them. This puts the child under pressure because they know that they are expected to win. The opponent could have a good form, or the feeling of being entitled to win could blur the mind of the child to an extent where they can't focus on the game. The child should initially learn how to enjoy the game and fight from the first second to the last, and when their brain is mature enough, then they should be taught to handle the pressure of expectations. A very common mistake is that children face such pressure very early, sometimes even at the age of 7. These children often quit the sport early. The constant pressure keeps their muscles tight and they become injured more often, or they burn out because they are tired of constantly having to defend their position. If professionalism is expected too early, the fun will disappear. What to say? Nothing. There is no need for constant motivation. A player with a good mindset has sufficient inner motivation to push themselves to perform better. There was a golden generation of ice hockey players in Slovakia who grew up in the 1980s on the same street in Trenčín, Slovakia, and they won 3 medals in the World Cup in the years 2000 to 2003, including the gold in 2002 in Gothenburg, Sweden. Nobody on the street told them to win or motivated them to become better than themselves. They all possessed the motivation within themselves. If children are constantly offered motivational monologues, they are only reminded that their parents or coaches want them to win. Sometimes all the parent needs to do is smile, hug the children, and let them play. Have a good time. With this sentence, we show that we don't care about the outcome of the match, but we want to make sure that they enjoy what they are doing. When a child first steps into the field aiming to enjoy their time, it's much different compared to being told, "You can beat him," because then they think that the point of the game is to win. Focus on the effort or tactics. To talk about this, it is important that you forge a trusting relationship with your child. Then you can help them by explaining the importance of the effort to them, and if a child listens, they will know that it does not matter whether they have a good day or a bad day. What matters is that they try. You can also tell them something along the lines of, "We know that it will be a tough match, but make him work for it." If you are a calm parent or a coach who understands the principles and strategies of the sport, and you see that the child is slightly stressed, the reason could be that they don't know how to play against the opponent in the upcoming match. In this case, it might be useful to offer them specific advice. Play to their backhand, keep the puck away from the middle on the defense, and open up the field by passing wide are examples of such advice. Such simple instructions can calm down the player and make them believe that they can win if they follow the advice. In collective sports, the coach's tactical advice is expectedly superior to parents'. Therefore, one should be cautious not to interfere with the team's tactics. During the match. Here are a few examples of words I heard when watching junior tennis tournaments. "Try harder or I will hang you on the fence." "Move your ass, Peter, you are moving like a turkey." "Calm the hell down or you will see what I'm going to do." Do you think that this will make the player calm and focused? Of course not. Their fear will grow even bigger, and they will try to end the suffering as soon as possible. Such words basically translate to threats, though made under the assumption of being calming. That's just ridiculous. The parent wants their child to calm down by screaming, "Calm the hell down," in anger. If somebody actually calms down after this, they can become yogis. If your child plays sports, I am sure you know that feeling when you are sitting behind the goal, fence, or on the bleachers and your child's match is really close and you are shaking emotionally. The emotions you experience are often stronger than the players because you can't score the goal or hit a winning shot yourself. You might feel helpless. This is the point where you can make a difference. Impulsive parents can't control their emotions and scream from behind the fence, thinking they are helping their children. Parents who belong to the impulse category consider this. Why do you yell? Do you think your child will become more focused if you yell? More relaxed? You see that child is stressed. Why stress them out further? What do you expect to change when you yell? Is there any chance the child will not think about your outraged reactions and maintain a clear mind? You need to critically think about these questions. If you do, you realized that none of the above really helps the child. Contrarily, it hurts their cognitive and emotional balance. Criticism, or God forbid, threats further exacerbate the situation. However, even complimenting children too much can be damaging. When we cheer, compliment, or clap too much and we do it in a specific way, children may get the feeling that we only care about them winning. If the focus is on winning, enjoying the game is relegated to the background. Moreover, complimenting and clapping are effective only if there is something available to compliment. What will we do if children don't have a good day or at times when their game is not their best? The child might feel the sudden loss of support and become disappointed. That's why it is important for them to enjoy the game themselves without paying too much attention to the results. Many children play sports just to make their parents happy. It can be observed that when children keep looking to the stands after every rotation or point, thinking, was it good enough? They can't attain their full potential if they are mainly seeking their parents' admiration. Don't get me wrong, family support is extremely important. However, instead of complimenting and clapping oriented on winning, support the particular behavior that you wish to witness again. If your child plays a great point, runs a courageous play, fights for the puck or ball that seemed lost, you should program your child's emotion to repeat these actions. Don't clap to drive your child to win, clap to appreciate the things that you want to see them do in the future. So, what should we say during the match? Nothing. Remain a quiet spectator. From now on, try to perceive the matches of your children as your own training. Practice emotional control, focus on your body language, facial expressions, gestures, etc. Try to take a deep breath, observe what is going on in your muscles, pay attention to what your thoughts are, and become conscious of them. Such observing and controlling is the first step on the path to helping your child. Be an example of emotional consistency for your children. If you want your children to be calm, you should be calm. After the match. You should have won. How did you manage to lose? Did you win? Did you score? If you have read this book all the way to this point, you probably know that the sentences above are not the ones that build a confident child. The moments after the match are the most crucial, and we should hence pay very close attention to our words at that point. The player's confidence is closely tied to their environment's reactions to their performance. The mind of the player is open and accessible to the people they trust. Adults are capable of acting rational when analyzing their own performance, and they know how to consider their own development through long-term perspective. This doesn't imply that the confidence of the adult player can't rapidly deteriorate. However, as mentioned previously, young players are definitely more vulnerable. Their confidence and faith in themselves are not that deeply embedded, and hence they require further guidance. People who guide young players hold tremendous power and therefore should be careful of what they say and what tone they use. What we say can influence the child in a positive way and encourage them to train harder and learn a lesson from the match. Contrarily, it can also destroy their self-confidence and cause them to doubt their every move. Hence, it is important that we set the goal that we wish to achieve through the conversation. Rationally, going over the course of the match and pushing the child in the direction in which we want them to develop is the result of effective conversations. We can psychologically help the child if we conduct such beneficial conversations in a refreshing manner. The coaching method. The coaching method is a way to constructively pose questions about the match in order to discuss the tactical and technical aspects of the match. It is a highly effective way to react to the athlete's performance, but it is necessary to point out that it shouldn't be used all the time. In situations where you clearly see that the player does not want to talk about the match and instead is looking forward to the next one, the coaching method could be counterproductive. Try to differentiate whether it is the appropriate time to apply the method or not. If applied accurately, it builds multiple layers of confidence, boosts the process of gaining experience, promotes self-awareness and self-evaluation, and helps in developing critical thinking and problem-solving abilities. Furthermore, the motivation level of the players increases because they have a say in the entire process. They build their own game instead of blindly following the coach. Such active participation makes the player understand the principles of the game better because they are forced to figure them out rather than to merely listen to them. Players are more engaged, and their losses help to develop and shape their mental side too. An example of an ideal post-conversation using coaching method. We suggest using open questions, questions that can't be answered with one word or where there are more than two options to pick from as answers. Here is an example of a post-match conversation between a son and a father who did not see the actual match using the coaching method. Hey buddy, how did you enjoy the match? I lost. Okay, what do you think you were doing good in that match? I managed to hit quite a few winners. Great, I'm glad you did that well. What was the final score? I won the first set 7-5, and then I lost the second and third 3-6 and 2-6. Oh, so it was a battle. You must have fought really hard. What do you think worked the best against the opponent? He was a little stocky and didn't run too well, so I tried to make him move, but sometimes I rushed too much and made mistakes. What would have happened if you had kept the ball in a little longer? I might have won because in the third set he looked like he was tired. What would you like to practice in order to play better against him next time? Keeping the ball in play and recognizing when to hit a winner. That would help. Okay, do you think you can tell your coach what you have just told me? He will probably be able to give you more specific advice than me. Yes. Conversation analysis. Questions. Here is an analysis of the questions that were posed and other ones that we suggest using. How did you feel before the match? With this question, you are sending a message to the child that you care about how it felt more than about the result. They would feel that they are being supported and that the parent is interested in them more than in the match they just played. At what point of the match did you feel the best? This question contains elements from the previous one, caring about the child more than about the result. Furthermore, it directs the mind of the child to think positively. We encourage the child to learn a new lesson and build positive associations to the moments in which they performed well. What do you think you did well in this match? A child has to slightly ponder over this question, and it would help them become more aware that there were good moments in the match regardless of the result. Several times, the player leaves the field disappointed despite the fact that their performance, or at least some aspects of their performance, were commendable. Don't be afraid to query about specific aspects in which you know the child did well in order to strengthen their confidence. If the child inserts positive emotions to the nerve circuits, those will function more effectively. If the conversation is about mistakes, the brain circuits carrying negativity will be reinforced and doubt, fear, and anxiety will follow. Encourage development in a positive direction and focus on the good emotional tune. What would you like to practice in order to play better in the match? With this question, you are stimulating critical thinking and also help the child to become dedicated to a goal that would make them better. You are not merely saying, you will practice high balls. Instead, the child themselves are offered the space to think, and simultaneously, their inner motivation is promoted. The child plays an integral part in their own training process because they decide what to practice and they know the reasons why that particular area requires increased attention. A motivated, focused child training with a purpose absorbs information promptly, which is a dream for each coach. What do you think worked the best against the opponent? If you know the technical or tactical principles of the game, don't tell your child right away. Try to lead the conversation in such a way that they will figure out the answer themselves. With this, you force them to think critically, consider more varieties, and locate the appropriate solutions. Make sure that when you ask these questions, you don't slip into a reproachful tone, i.e., what do you think you should have done? Because that can undermine the child's decision-making and confidence in the future. Timing. The conversation example is, by the way, an actual dialogue that I witnessed. The father waited on purpose in the cafe for an hour after his son called him to pick him up. This father gave his son the time to take a shower, talk, and play with other kids so that he would be more open to holding a rational conversation about the match. This is called timing. To think that the appropriate time to give feedback to the child is directly after the match is not accurate. Children should be given time to activate the rationality centers in their brain because emotions, which often last several hours, inhibit activity in these centers. Therefore, after the match, children often say, "I don't know." It's not that they don't know, but that they can't or don't want to think, decide, or plan. If the match was particularly emotional, you can even talk about it the next day when you are walking your dog outside together. In a calm, relaxed mood in the middle of nature, the child is considerably more likely to open up and discuss the match. Style and emotional balance. In the dialogue, the young athlete was not given the solutions. Instead, the parent encouraged him to find them himself. Thus, the child was provided space to grow mentally by becoming self-aware. The conversation could switch the player's attitude from being disappointed after the loss to being determined to reach the goals that were set by himself. The player is now the one who wants to improve his consistency and the ability to recognize when to hit a winner. He is motivated and ready to listen to the coach's advice because he wants to reach his goal. If children face difficulties in understanding the content of your words, from the outside it is obvious that they are under the influence of emotions. However, you as a parent might also be under the influence of emotions and have difficulty in recognizing that nothing reasonable will be understood by the child. This is why the emotional balance needs to start from you. You should be calm to realize the impact that your words will have and also the tone you use. If you are not rational and reasonable, you don't recognize the seriousness of the words you utter at that moment. If you are not rational, it will become extremely difficult to control things while being emotional. Try to reflect on how the emotions modify the things you say, especially the negative ones. I bet there have been many occasions where you have said things you later regretted. Most of the time, this can be credited to emotions. Controlling emotions is, therefore, key to the consistent reactions to results and performance. The guardian method. Many parents tend to constantly ask their children about their day, practice, school, etc. We already discussed that asking the exact same question too often makes children feel like they are being monitored. Imagine if you are being asked about your work every day. How often does something special happen there? Don't feel guilty about not asking the same set of questions 24/7. No one will say that you are a terrible parent. Try to relieve the pressure that you have put on yourself when it comes to communicating with your child. Not asking anything is not a sign of lassitude. Contrarily, it is a mature way of communicating by providing the other time to decide what to tell you. If they decide to tell you nothing, it is their choice. Respect it and don't selfishly demand information for yourself. This method is called the guardian method because with this approach, the relationship between the prince or princess and their royal guard is mimicked. The royal guard merely stands in front of the chamber doing his duty protecting a member of the royal family. The princess feels safe because she knows her chamber is protected and at the same time her privacy is respected. When she decides to come out of her chamber, she knows that the guard will be there for her, and so it is up to her to decide if she does or doesn't want to have a talk with the guard. This way, the princess is more likely to talk to the guard more than if the guard were to ask her questions himself. With this method, you are there for your children when they need you and they feel like you are not asking anything in return. This is the reason why this method is effective. Children feel like they are selflessly supported by you. To let them know that they can tell you anything, you can make statements along the lines of, "If you need help with anything, ask me anytime," or "Feel free to talk about anything. I am here for you." Again, make sure that you don't overuse this or they will start being pressured to tell you something. By acting as a guardian, the parent sends the children these positive signals. 1. The result is not important. There is no pressure. This way, you are not a person whom the child needs to answer to after the match because there are no questions to answer. The child is not being told what they are supposed to do and how. You don't react, and therefore, the child is forced to sort out the issues on their own. 2. You promote their inner motivation. You are sending a signal that it's about the children themselves. It is their own universe, their own place, their own way to go about things, and their own path that they have chosen. You are not here to control, correct, and interrupt them. Instead, you are there to help when they ask for help. 3. You are helping them to regulate their own emotions. By not reacting, you are helping your children to explore their own emotional spectrum. Subsequently, when they experience the various emotions themselves, they learn how to manage them on their own. Even though parents mean well, they often resort to pitying their children, which results in a weakening of their coping ability. By asking a child questions about the match after they switch their focus to something else, you are forcing them to experience an already handled emotion all over again. The direct method. The direct method is effective when you recognize that the child is asking for objective feedback about the match. When the child is unsure whether they resolved the situations appropriately, when they wonder whether a particular moment was their fault, and when they ask what they could have done better, it might be more helpful to objectively state the facts without an emotion attached to the statement. Your opponent was older and has played more matches in their career, which is why I assume he made better choices in the important moments of the match. On break points, he placed the serve where you did not expect it, and that's why he was able to win his serving games more often than you in both sets. Despite that, you surprised him with some good returns, and if you work on the variability of your own serve, I think next time it could be a different match. What is stated above is an example of this method. However, please pay attention to a few key elements that have to be present in this method. 1. In the realistic summary of the match, the parent made sure that they told the child that they didn't fail them because they acknowledged the experience of the opponent. 2. The statement does not carry a negative tone. Your serve was bad and you lack variability would be negative. Instead, they praise the positive aspects such as returns. 3. The statement has a purpose. It serves to be used in the future because the parent recommended the solution. If they just said, "Opponent's serve is better than yours," then the child may not have known how to utilize that statement to their benefit. If a child asks for feedback and a coach or a parent uses these elements in their analysis while having the emotions under control, they can motivate the child for further work. The common sign of all these methods is that they should be used at the appropriate time. It requires attention on the parents' and coach's side to recognize the emotional state of a child. Moreover, active observation is needed to see what impact the different methods have on the child. In general, however, if you are not sure about what to say, don't say anything and just be there for your child like a guardian. Reward and punishment. The tools forming confidence. Both humans and animals have their behavioral patterns shaped by the feedback their actions receive from the environment. The feedback can either be positive, reward which causes the individual to be more likely to perform a particular activity again, or it could be negative, punishment which will deter the individual from acting that way again. Reward doesn't have to be something materialistic. Both verbal and nonverbal compliments can serve as a reward. For example, a back pat, a wink, words of support can all be considered a reward. Since a child doesn't know what is good and what is bad from birth, they are shaped by the feedback they are given. What a parent tolerates, what they encourage, and what they reprimand creates boundaries and values that the child will live by. The feedback comes from the environment, which does not always have to be you. For example, if your child runs around the table, they can receive feedback when they stumble and fall. It hurt. This was basically a punishment for their actions. However, if we are not cautious about the feedback our child gets from the environment, they can seriously hurt themselves. Hence, it is better to shape their behaviors in a way that would prevent dangers. However, what if we constantly tell the child not to run around the table? We even raise our voice and they still don't listen. Often, a more effective way to communicate a message is to reward good behavior instead of punishing a bad one. In this case, a verbal reward is processed on a neurochemical level by a dopamine system that stores the behavior as reward creating. This approach, of course, requires the paying of more attention to the child because if the child is not doing anything wrong, the parent has the tendency of focusing on their own tasks and fails to recognize the good behavior. I, as a father, acknowledge that it is natural to focus on my own tasks when my child is behaving well. However, I encourage you to seek opportunities to complement good behavior more actively. The disadvantages of using only negative feedback is that it rarely creates a positive mood or vibe. Think of the positive feedback as a token that you can use to increase the chance of repeating the desired behavioral pattern in the future. If your child played the sport for an hour and then you sum it with a brief comment such as, "That was weak," you are taking away from your child the opportunity to grow. Pay close attention not only to the final score but also to behavior, overall performance, emotional control, resilience, and various aspects of the game, and use your token as a reward placed in the direction in which you want the child to grow. It is important to be aware of the frequency and ratio of using positive versus negative feedback. It is up to your judgment to determine when to use which. A specific formula to follow is not available. If you rarely use positive feedback and you really save it for something special, you might lose a great tool to form and strengthen certain behavioral patterns. Positive feedback also boosts learning specific coordination skills because of dopamine, which is connected to positive emotions. On the other hand, if the parent only offers positive feedback and overuses rewards, the act loses its charm and becomes ordinary. Just imagine someone gives you a chocolate every 3 minutes. The first 3 or 4 bars might excite you, but by the end of the day, you wouldn't even know what to do with them anymore. An eye-opening study. Are you praising the talent? You are blocking it. Stanford University social psychology professor Carol Dweck spent 30 years researching principles of motivation, and her conclusions are extremely interesting. One of her research topics was the link between motivation and the type of feedback used. The aim was to understand how a small signal such as an appraisal sentence can influence the performance of a person, and what is the best way to communicate that signal. A sample of 400 students from New York were given a problem to solve, and when she was giving the score to the students individually, she praised half of them for their intelligence and the other half for their effort. Following this, all of the students were given a choice between the next problem being a harder one or an easier one. A whopping 92% of the students who were praised for their effort chose the harder problem. 2/3 of the students who were praised for their intelligence chose the easier problem. The difference is rather stunning, and one might ask what caused it. When intelligence was praised, the students' brains looked for ways to succeed again, and calculated that the easiest way to do so was by picking the less difficult problem. The calculation is basically correct, but can you see how always picking the easiest road could make it difficult to progress? Do you want your child to progress? After the second problem, a third one, the hardest one, followed. None of the students performed well, but they reacted differently based on the feedback they received after the first test. The students who were praised for effort tested solutions, sought strategies, and experimented. Later, they admitted that they thought the testing was fun and they had a good time participating. The group of students praised for intelligence hated the last test, and many of them felt frustrated. They said that it made them feel not intelligent. The final stage of this research was to clarify whether the feedback helped the students in improving and solving problems on the level of the first one. The average score of the students praised for intelligence dropped by 20%. where the group praised for effort raised their average score by nearly 30%. This is what 5 words can do for you, Carol Dweck said. The study was performed 5 times in order to prove that these results were not a coincidence, and the same observations were made all 5 times. This study should be a scientific argument to discourage parents who tend to compliment their child's talent. If the children lose, they will feel like they are not talented or clever anymore, and they won't have sufficient confidence to risk and take on difficult challenges. If a mother on the way home compliments her child on how talented they are even without seeing their performance, she might be hurting their progress. What if the child acted rude towards the coach and was not disciplined? They will get rewarded with praise, which will make their future behavior even worse. Praising, if done too much and for tasks that are too easy, can also cause the child to be afraid of the harder challenges. Remember, reward a behavior, activity, effort, emotion, or decision that you want to see again. If you do, you would have used your token appropriately and increased the chance of the desired thing occurring again. Additionally, don't praise the result without any positive element that contributed to it.